Good morning, good afternoon, good morning. All right. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in. Today we are going into part 9 of 2 Kings. And where we left off last, we actually talked about Elisha's death, although we didn't do any of the verses following that. So we'll go ahead and start with that last verse and kind of continue from there, because there are some key points regarding Elisha's death that we did not talk about yet, that we missed. Go over that briefly. And then again, we're going into the procession and succession of kings that are going on. Of course, this is 2 Kings. What else do we expect, right? I'm sure similar themes will carry on throughout the Old Testament as well, but only time will tell. Again, we're making great progress, so I'm very happy with everybody engaging and sticking with this. By the end of this, you will have a very full and complete knowledge of most of everything in the Bible, okay? Really, we're covering everything. I'm trying not to leave really the key details out, but again, these are just kind of the main points that I've strung together, like you're reading the entire thing front to cover to cover. These are the main points that will, keep the context going so you can understand. If you ever open the Bible yourself and flip to a random spot, you actually might reference something that you remember learning. So that's great. Let's go ahead and get into it with a quote. Again, Matthew Arnold. The annotation is a little bit weird on this one. I don't exactly know what this is, but let's just go ahead and start with this quote here. It says, "In poetry, no less than in life, he is a beautiful and void his luminous wings in vain." All right, this is the annotation is Shelley, quoting his own sentence in his essay on Byron, Essays on Criticism, 2nd series. Again, it's Matthew Arnold supposedly, but it's looking a little confusing. We're talking about an ineffectual angel, right? So an angel that is not effective. And we're talking about, beating his wings in vain, literally, right? But a beautiful angel nonetheless. This does give a little bit of a peek into life after death, and we hopefully get to discuss angels a little bit further. We touched on a theme in regards to Lucifer, who was also an angel, and I'd like to go into a little bit more about, the nature of angels in the future. But nonetheless, this is also a look into life after death. And I know we did not cover Elisha's grand ascension. There really was not any details about, him being taken up by chariots, much like Prophet Elijah. He has a little bit of a different situation going on, which we'll soon learn about. But in regards to these ineffectual angels, we also touched on the nature of the kings, right? And how there may be some type of reincarnation going on just because of the fact that we do use the same name, much like other monarchies, right? We use the same names for royalty, right? So that's what's going on here. So there may or may not be any sense of reincarnation. But what happens after these great kings pass away, right? They are granted all this wealth, all this glory on earth. So what does it look like for them after they pass on? Are they, in fact, ineffectual angels that beat their wings in a void, right? Looking out after the kingdom, essentially, that they left behind. We want to try to consider what kind of reward someone like the Lord, right, the great entity that the Lord is, what kind of reward would he give certain kings? Of course, I'm sure some kings are tiered above others, and then some of them are just, ineffective kings. So do they then become ineffectual angels looking after the kingdom that they left behind? Or do they return here on earth to finish out what they started? So there's a lot of different questions, but I think this quote, this poem, part of a poem, criticism, what have you, talks a little bit, allows us to peek behind the curtain a little bit of life after death for these great rulers. That's the best I could do as far as tying it in. So let's go ahead and begin with chapter 13, looking at Elisha's death once more. It says, Now Elisha had been suffering from the illness from which he died. Jehoash, king of Israel, went down to see him and wept over him. My father, my father. All right, so we talked about this briefly, how he is honoring Elisha, which is rare for the side of Israel, honoring prophets, right, of the Lord. But he is honoring him, but really this call, my father, was a call in distress and grief. So Jehoash was very distressed that his army was destroyed. He was fearful of Aram taking over Israel. So this was really a cry of grief after reading a little bit further. He says, what about my army? What about, really the people of Israel? But he was more so concerned about his army. So Elisha gives him these dying instructions. He says, Take the bow in your hands, he said to the king of Israel. When he had taken it, Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. He said, Open the east window, and he opened it. Shoot, Elisha said, and he shot. The Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Aram. So he goes ahead and instructs Jehoash to shoot this arrow, and it's really just a symbol for the victory that Israel is going to have over Aram. As stated, Elisha declared, You will completely destroy the Arameans at Aphek. So after that, Elisha died and was buried. This moment too, why I showed you in the chart, the last video from last night, the arrows, right? I thought that was kind of cute, symbolic, even though we've used arrows before. But this is actually, the arrow of victory is mentioned. There is another part in here where Elijah does tell King Jehoash to go ahead and strike the arrow on the ground 3 times. And he does so. And Elijah says, Why didn't you strike the arrow on the ground more times than 3? Because you were timid, if you will, timid. Then you will only beat the Arameans 3 times. And then after that, they could overtake you again. But this actually does happen. Let's go ahead and continue. Elisha died and was buried. It says, Once, while some Israelites were burying a man, burying a man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders. So they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. When the body touched Elisha's bones, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. So another great recollection of resurrection. Okay? It doesn't, again, really talk about Elisha's ascension or burial to an extent. It just says he was buried, and after some time, in order to hide this other body that they were burying, they threw it into Elisha's tomb, and the man came to life when he touched Elisha's bones. So it's kind of a weird thing to put in here, but it certainly is notable given the fact that, somebody after death came back alive. Sometimes it is speculated that was Elisha's spirit jumping out of his bones and going into that man. Can certainly be so, because we talked about Elijah and Elisha, holding so inherently the spirit of truth, the Holy Spirit. They were totally encompassed by that spirit, so they were very, very powerful individuals, and they just did amazing things. So with the help of God, right, being instilled with the Holy Spirit. So it's possible. I wouldn't put that past Elisha to go ahead and walk about the earth a little bit more in another body. Who knows, right? Let's go ahead and continue. Hazael, king of Aram, died, and then Ben-Hadad, his son, succeeded him as king. It says, Then Joash, son of Jehoahaz, recaptured from Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael, the towns he had taken in battle from his father Jehoahaz. 3 times Jehoash defeated him, and so he recovered the Israelite towns. So just as Elisha had spoken to him, he defeated the Arameans 3 times, which is really an extraordinary feat considering the size of their army was significantly reduced, as that's what he was stressed and worried about. But they defeated him, and he retook a lot of Israel's land. And again, this was after Hazael died. This was Ben-Hadad ruling Aram at the time. continuing on in the second year of Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, began to reign. So we talked a little bit about Amaziah, son of Joash. He is now ruling in Judah. He was a very effective ruler. He did good. He did well in the eyes of the Lord. He did not impose any of the sins on the people of Judah that, were frequently, a problem. But he was a very good ruler. He was very confident. He had a lot of confidence in battle and things like that. It says he was the one who defeated 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt and captured Selah in battle, calling it Joktheel, the name it has to this day. It says here Jehoash, on Israel's side, rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and Jeroboam his son succeeded him as king. So there's actually a moment here too. Not only does, we're going to go back to Amaziah real quick, not only does he defeat these Edomites, he actually challenges Israel into battle. And they kind of go back and forth. Israel does not want to go up against Judah because they know that they're going to be defeated. But the case was this. They did end up going to battle, and Judah routed Israel, although Amaziah, the one who challenged them, was actually captured at the end. So Israel actually took a lot of their bounty, their gold, and things like that. And essentially they weren't defeated necessarily because the soldiers had already retreated, but in order to give Amaziah back his throne, they actually took his plunder before they returned him post-capture. So his confidence kind of befell him there. Okay. Now that was Jeroboam. His son succeeded him as king. Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, lived for 15 years after the death of Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel. Okay. And they conspired against him. They conspired against Amaziah in Jerusalem. And he fled to Lachish, but they sent men after him to Lachish and killed him there. So I said there was going to be a similar fate that suffered Amaziah, just like his father was assassinated, right? Just like his father was assassinated, same situation here. So we wonder, there's not a lot of details as to why was Judah rebelling against the king, especially if they were generally viewed as good and efficient kings. There must have been some details that were efficient kings. There must have been some details that were left out that we're not sure, why the people were unhappy. I did tell you Israel was extremely, extremely under pressure, and they were suffering a lot. I think a lot of that was starting to creep into Judah, so they were feeling a bit rebellious. But it's really beyond me. There's not a lot of details as to why. Ooh, hello, friend. So it says, then all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in place of his father Amaziah. So again, it's a little confusing, right? You're going to go ahead and kill off his dad to only make him king at 16 years old. Who knows? There must have been something going on. We do know that there was problems in Israel, but Judah we haven't really heard too much. It says here, Jeroboam, the second son of Jehoash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria. He reigned 41 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord and did not turn away from any of the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Although he was the one who restored the boundaries of Israel from Lebo Hamath to the Dead Sea, in accordance with the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, spoken through his servant Jonah of Amittai, the prophet from Gath Hepher. Again, on Israel, we thought they were maybe turning away, but again, they have this other king who is letting everybody have a free-for-all, right? He did not turn away from the other sins, although he was doing good things in the sense of restoring their boundaries. And it was something that was commanded by the Lord through the prophet Jonah. And if you're wondering, is this the same Jonah that was swallowed by the big fish? Yes, it is the same Jonah. This narrative is not recorded here in this section, but when we read the book of Jonah, we'll learn about that fun narrative that we all remember. That was the prophet, though at least we know the time frame, right, where Jonah was around. So he introduces just briefly here. Again, this is the king, Jeroboam. Okay, yeah, Jeroboam again. Let's see, Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Oh, and how interesting too. I mean, this is Jeroboam the second, right? And it says here, he did evil, did not turn away from any of the sins of Jeroboam, the original Jeroboam, who was introducing part of the one, he was really, I guess it says here every single time that he's the main problem, but he's really like half the problem of introducing the idol worship and things like that to Israel. But it said this is literally Jeroboam the second. So we wonder, the congruencies are there, much like all of the other kings in Israel, to be quite honest. But it says here, the Lord had seen how bitterly everyone in Israel, whether slave or free, was suffering. There was no one to help them. And since the Lord had not said he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash. Jeroboam then rested with his ancestors, the kings of Israel, and Zechariah his son succeeded him as king. Okay, so again, rapid succession. I know we go through a lot of death and revival. We go through a lot of death and succession here. But even though Jeroboam, like all the people before him, were not going to turn away from sin, God still has a soft spot in the heart for Israel. Of course he does, right? Because the covenant is there. It's not like they're doing 100% bad all the time. It's just that one thing that, is still upsetting the Lord and arousing him to, give them the cold shoulder, essentially. So he is helping them in a military sense at this time. He's not causing everybody to die off. He's not causing the army to dwindle to absolutely nothing. He's giving them defenses. He's granting them confidence. And, he's keeping them sustained, if you will. So now we have here Jeroboam rested with his ancestors, and then Zechariah. So we're leaving off at Zechariah. If you go back to the chart that I posted last night, you'll see him at the bottom on Israel's side. And just for the sake of taking a look, we have Azariah still on Judah's side. Alright, it's kitty land over here. They just love to sleep in the little crook of my arm, don't you? But yes, thanks for listening, guys. I know it's a lot, but we're almost through. We're on part 9. I do want to try to finish this in 12 sections. And if you think this is a lot, we're going to cover a lot more to come. Let's just say in 2 Kings, and after we have Chronicles. So Chronicles is really going to be just our rehash of everything that we really did already cover in the Old Testament. Genealogies, lines, tribes of Israel, that sort of thing. So that's going to be a doozy. But again, it's just really so we understand, like, okay, this is what was happening in this book. This is what was happening in this book. And we know names now. Before I did not know, names to save the life of me and who did what. So we are all learning on this learning journey together. So thank you for listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and an almost end to your week. Talk to you very soon.